Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, technically this is a day after the last pod, but in fact it's 30 seconds afterwards. But I'm still guessing you may have managed to squeeze in some media duties in the meantime. This is one of our interview pods, Kieran. Unfortunately, you couldn't make it, which is a shame.
Yes, I'm gutted, absolutely gutted.
Well, also, it was a great interview, but not only that, but he started using some financial terms, which I couldn't reach my phone to Google them. So I was thinking, oh my God, the one time that Kieran's not here. It's an interview with Mark Ashton, who's the chief executive of Ipswich Town, who I think must be quite difficult to work for. Inspiring to work for, but quite difficult because he's a force of nature. But I learnt more about the inner workings of a football club in this interview than I have done in quite a long time. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. It's a real pleasure to talk to you. Just to get last season out of the way, have you known anything like that League One title race last season? I mean, for those of us watching it, it was fantastic. For the three clubs in it, it must have been heart attack territory, wasn't it?
I think painful is probably the word. I've been in this industry a very, very long time. And there was a point where I thought 98 points and 101 goals wasn't going to be enough. 4 losses, 14 draws, 28 wins. The form that we showed in the last 15 games was incredible. But also the form that the other clubs did over that period was just incredible. You know, we come in after games, and Plymouth have won again, Sheffield Wednesday have won again, and it was only up until probably the 4th or 5th game that Barnsley wasn't in that mix. So, yeah, painful is probably the right word, guys.
Was there a time? I mean, it would have been a travesty if either one of the three hadn't gone up. But was there a time when you thought, "Oh no, it's Plan B, it's playoffs"?
I think you have to have that in the back of your mind. But we were really clear that we believed if we played to our potential, if we focused on us, we were good enough to get into the top 2. And I think the minute you start letting your mind slip into the playoffs, you enter the territory of self-fulfilling prophecies. You will drop into the playoffs. So we kept mentally strong, and it was enough to get us across the line in the end.
Before we talk more about Ipswich, Mark, and football finance, in particular in the Championship, the league that Kieran calls the basket case, tell us just a little bit about your background in the game. The East Anglian Times, I noticed, refer to you as a man of action, dynamic, relentless. Are you happy with that?
I've been in this industry a long time, 51 years of age, former player, not a particularly good one, and I've spent a lifetime working in different clubs in different positions, and the last 20 plus years as a CEO and director. For me, to be successful in this industry and in this role, it has to be a way of life. It can't just be a job. There are no days off. It's early mornings, late nights. It's Saturdays and Sundays. And I'm certainly not complaining about that because I feel very privileged to do the job that I do. But for us to stand out, one of the things that is key is hard work. And what I find is what other people's interpretation of hard work is and what mine is can be very different. So I think relentless is a really good explanation. Some would say I'm obsessed. I make no apologies for that. But I think if you look at the clubs I tend to go into, and when I go into them, they're turnaround projects. They're in some form of crisis at that point. Ipswich was certainly in crisis for sure. And for me, it's a way of life and a total obsession.
You know the Championship very well, Mark. Tell us a little about your previous experience there and what you make of a league that is so challenging in both football and financial terms.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time in the Championship, been promoted out of it a number of occasions to the Premier League. I've also sat on the EFL board as a championship director for 3 years during COVID, which was both challenging and probably the best educational experience I've had in my career, seeing football from the inside and how clubs really work right across the spectrum was a great opportunity and something I was very privileged to do in that time. The problem with the championship is really simple. It's emotion. You're in a division that is one step away from the golden ticket. It's one step away from the Premier League where everybody wants to be, and it's one step away from that huge financial gain of getting across the line and into the Premier League. And what happens is you have a plan, and a lot of clubs don't stick to the plan in the Championship because they start to get close towards either the playoffs or automatic promotion. And then the model changes because they overstretch and overreach. And I can understand that. And, I've been guilty of that at times in the past. But you've got to stick to your plan. That obsession with trying to get to the Premier League causes logical, sensible people who've made a lot of money in their own businesses in their own right to make emotionally led decisions, which can be very dangerous. It's a tough place. It's a tough place to be.
It's how do you handle the expectations of fans, Mark, in a division where the average losses are £470,000 a week? Because your job is to sustain the club in the future, isn't it? Rather than you need to get into the Premier League, hopefully, but you need a club that is financially sustainable. But also you've got fans who are going, right, it's taken us a long time to get here. Let's spend the money to move on.
Yeah, you put that really well. Which is the challenge of the Championship. You're absolutely right. I think the majority of clubs in the Championship are losing circa 10 million a year, which is never a good place to be, but it's a fairly standard number across the board. And it's a number that will be familiar to us because that's circa the number that we're in and around at the moment. The only way you deal with that number, really affect that number, is A, to grow the business and drive revenue. B, part of that driving revenue is to play a trade and make profit on player sales. And C, to reduce player salaries, because those are the three numbers that really affect your business. You cut player salaries against the market value, if you like, at your peril, because you've seen clubs do that. You've seen this club do that. And then you're on a downward spiral because you very easily slip through the trapdoor into League One. And Ipswich will tell you how difficult that was for us to get out of that division. The only other way that you move to a more financially viable model is having a new agreement with the Premier League, where the revenue gap from a broadcast and a central funding perspective, the line is smoothed, if you like, between the two divisions as a smaller step. But even if you get that away, if you get that deal away, it doesn't work unless you bookend that with new salary management protocols. Because if you don't, you'll get more money from the Premier League, more money from broadcast that will simply slide through to players, inflate salaries further, and the problem actually becomes bigger than it currently is. So those, if you like, are the key pieces that really move the dial financially, and none of them are easy to answer.
I'll come on to your transfer policy later, Mark. In the meantime, this is the part of the show, you've mentioned the gap between those two divisions. Kieran would 100% be asking you about parachute payments, his current obsession. Will your view on parachute payments change once Ipswich are in the Premier League?
Well, look, I think if you're outside probably 6 or 7 clubs in the Premier League, you're only ever 2 poor transfer windows away from being relegated.
Yeah.
At the start of the season, would any of us really have thought that Leicester would have been relegated? I certainly wouldn't have. Yeah. With the money that Leeds had spent, I wouldn't have seen them being relegated. Would we have seen Everton be in a relegation battle? I'm not sure I would have seen that for another season running. So they're very close to that trapdoor opening at any one point, unless you're one of the Galacticas. But in saying that, you've seen Chelsea have an indifference. Yeah. So I think even if we were in the Premier League, I would certainly be saying, look, we need to smooth the line between the Premier League and the Championship. Why? this wonderful game that we're also fortunate to work in and has been round a lot longer than we have and will be here hopefully when we're all gone. And I think we all have a responsibility to leave the game in a better place than we found it. And, we look at, I've got US owners, so we understand US sport really well. The uniqueness for me is the family of football, is the pyramid. And I think we have to protect that pyramid. I sat on the league board when clubs went out of business, and I saw the challenges that had brought and how that had affected local communities and people's lives. So I think that making sure that the pyramid of football is protected, not just from a revenue perspective, but also from a cost control perspective, is really, really important. And I know the league are focused on looking at that. It's not an easy problem to solve, but I do think we all have a responsibility to look after the long-term future of the game.
You mentioned your US owners, Mark, and to outsiders like us, they seem like good owners. They seem like nice people. We've met a couple of them, spoke to them. But how does it affect your financial situation when long-term your owners are going to be looking for a return on their investment, presumably?
Yeah, I think anybody who comes into football in some way, shape or form would like to see a return on their investment. I think firstly, we're really fortunate here because they're very bright people who have come into football. And where, for me, they've been different to most is they understand business, they understand sport. But when they entered this, it's a new business to them. So rather than try and run this business themselves, they appointed myself and a management team to write a business plan and then deliver against that business plan. And where I'm so fortunate is they give me the oxygen to deliver the plan. They don't actively get involved in the selection of a manager or player recruitment, etc. They let us write the plan. They sign the plan off. They sign the money off that needs to be put into the business to deliver that plan. And then they challenge against key performance indicators on the way through. They're fantastic. And I think where we as an industry have seen challenges at times is, I say this very simply. I've been doing this a long time, and let's be really clear. I learn every single day. 30 to 40 years I've been in this industry. You don't stop learning. If I jumped into an aeroplane tomorrow and tried to fly that plane, the one thing I can promise you I'm going to do, I'm going to crash it because I haven't got the expertise to fly it.
Yeah.
But yet people come from outside of football into our industry, emotionally led at times, and then wonder why they can't straight away run the football clubs, because these are very unique organisations. And we've seen that happen time and time again. So I'm really fortunate to have really smart owners who back the management team, challenge the management team, support the management team, but don't interfere with the nuances of the running of the business. And I think that's a real advantage for us, because if you look at this football club compared with a lot of football clubs in the pyramid at the moment, we have stability. We're not going to chop and change our manager every 5 minutes. We're going to grow. We have a plan to move forward, and we'll stick to the plan. There is no erratic decision making. It's calm. It's considered. It's focused, and it's progressive. So we're really, really fortunate with regards to that. Where we're also fortunate is the money that comes into the football club is platinum plated. In a period where some people are questioning where money is coming from into football clubs, we are so fortunate to have a financial institution, a US pension fund that backs the football club. And it's important that you understand, organisations like PSPRS, who are our ultimate benefactors, hold these investments for different reasons. Some for cash flow, some are used for other requirements within their overall portfolio, and others are valuation-led and used to grow the overall worth of their portfolio. And if you look at, I can't give you the detail, what they bought this football club for, the money that we're investing, the value of the football club has already increased substantially moving to the Championship, and it would substantially improve again if we get to the Premier League. That's the reason why they're buying into value and a long-term investment. There's only 92 clubs in the Football League. If run properly, these are strong fundamental investments. And the opportunity there is to grow value. And they understand that, and they're in this for the long term. I cannot speak highly enough of my owners and the way they work. They're first class.
You mentioned your manager. Presumably, he's done such a great job. Presumably, half of your summer has been spent ring fencing him, hasn't it, and fending off other clubs with big sticks.
I think. Look, again, at times I get criticised for my managerial appointments. If you look at my career, Adi Boothroyd at Watford, first-time manager, promoted to the Premier League. Adi replaced by a young coach out of Chelsea called Brendan Rodgers.
Yeah.
Sean Dyche, Malcolm Mackay at Watford in the coaching setup at that point. Michael Appleton at Oxford, Lee Johnson at Bristol, Kieran McKenna at Ipswich Town. Yeah. Their DNA is very, very similar. It fits our model and the way we want to build the football club. So when we brought Kieran in, Ipswich is a big football club. It's got 2 former England managers in history. It's a lot of pressure. And I wanted someone who I thought would breathe fresh air, fresh life into the football club and wouldn't just be a steady pair of hands. I wanted someone who was more than that. And I think since Kieran's walked in the door, he's done nothing but surprise and delight. Hard-working, professional, outstanding values, and has worked already with some of the biggest names in the industry at Tottenham and United.
Yeah.
So we talked, Kieran and I talked right at the end of the season about a new contract. He wanted to make sure that our values and our vision for the club was still aligned and we hadn't changed, which we hadn't. And probably within a couple of days at the end of the season, the two of us had a handshake on his new deal. That takes 3 or 4 weeks to paper, holidays, etc. And you will have read the press. He was very highly regarded by other clubs in the industry. So to lock him down for another 4 years, I think it's perfect timing for us.
Back to the finances, Mark. We did a live show at Plymouth a couple of weeks ago, and there were fans of many Championship teams there. There seems to be an assumption from those fans that you will be one of the better off teams in the Championship financially. A, is that fair? And B, does that bring extra pressure?
I think our owners are certainly one of the more wealthy backers in the Championship, that's for sure. But it almost becomes irrelevant because, like all of the other football clubs, we govern now by P&S.
Yeah.
That means we've moved from SCMP protocols in League One to P&S protocols in the Championship, which means we are limited to what we can spend.
Yeah.
I think what probably helps us more is that, we will have average attendances of 30,000.
Yeah.
We've got big retail numbers. iFollow numbers are the biggest in the whole EFL, including the Championship. And that was in League One, by the way.
Wow.
So that revenue sits against our P&S. So that gives us some more firepower. We go back then to the player trading line. The player trading line is the other income generator that gives you the ability to spend more. Where, again, I'm really fortunate, to answer your question, is I'm never under any pressure on a cash basis from my owners to sell players. They want to build something. They want to build value in the team, value in the club, value in the squad. And I think if you look at our squad valuation that we tend to run internally all the time, our players were worth X when we joined the club. They're worth Y now, and that's why we've recruited young, hungry talent, Leif Davis from Leeds, Harry Clark from Arsenal, Nathan Broadhead from Everton, all in that early 20s bracket, who will grow with us on the pitch, but will bring financial value if and when we want to trade them. So that all comes into the overall discussion with the owners, who will stand behind us. Look, we'll be behind the parachute payment clubs for sure, because they will have big financial fair play headroom, and they'll have big cash bases, and they'll have Premier League squads. And I think what you've seen come down, you haven't seen 3 Championship clubs down. You've seen 3 established Premier League clubs come down this season.
Yeah.
That's going to be tough.
It's going to be tough. It'll be exciting. I mean, talking of your squad, transfer-wise, in the past couple of seasons, you've been at net zero, which takes some doing. Was that always going to be the plan?
It wasn't the detailed plan. It was always a direction of travel.
Right.
And it's interesting because people always focus on what you spend and what
Yeah.
players you're bringing in. But what we've done quietly behind the scenes is we've moved on players. And if you look at the likes of we sold Flynn Downs to Swansea, and we get paid well for that deal. But there are then contingencies if he moves again, and he moved again to West Ham. So if you like, we fed twice on that deal because we'd constructed it in that way to future-proof us. And there are two elements to this. When we sign players, I like to run the business on a cash basis, so we know where the cash is all the time. But we have to run the profit and loss now, the P&L here, because that's what we measured on from a financial fair play perspective. And you're absolutely right when you said if you look at the first, I think 3 years, financial years, the cash in and cash out on player trading is literally zero. And again, it's important that we keep housekeeping, we keep tidying up behind us, we bring little bits of income in, and those bits of income grow and grow and grow. So we've done well in relation to that. But again, what's really good here is no pressure from the owners to sell players. They want to see the club progress.
Well, we were really hoping Flynn Downs would come to Palace instead of West Ham. He's a player, isn't he? He's going to be very good.
Yes.
You've laid a new pitch and you've invested in other infrastructure as well. Tell us about that.
Yeah, the pitch at Portman Road, there's never been a modern pitch at Portman Road.
Right.
I was slightly nervous on what we were going to find when we took it up and dug down. But what that meant was no matter how much we spent on the pitch, additional artificial lighting, fertilizer, feed each year, the pitch just wasn't good enough. And when you get to November, December, it would start to deteriorate. That meant that we couldn't play any of our women's games on it. We struggled to even get the FA Youth Cup on it. Wow. And what it definitely meant was at the end of each season, we certainly couldn't put concerts or other events on the pitch, which when you consider our major sponsors a certain Ed Sheeran, might be a nice to have.
Yeah.
We've invested heavily. We've invested over £2 million on infrastructure projects on the pitch, which will give Kieran the tools to do his job. We've put 3 new pitches in at the training ground. We're invested in big screens, LED boards. We are exiting the EFL iFollow platform and investing in Town TV studios being built. We think we can genuinely grow revenue through the football club for all of this, which one helps for the financial losses, but two helps from the financial fair play perspective. And, if you look back at this football club, the first year we were here, they would sell on average 10 to 12,000 shirts a year.
Yeah.
Turn over about £1 million a year in retail. The second year, we managed to get that up to circa 20,000.
Yeah.
Last year, we sold over 50,000 shirts and revenue exceeded 4 million.
Yeah.
That's just in retail.
Yeah.
Ticketing, we didn't even get to the end of the early bird sales. We sold 20 to 21,500 season tickets. We've capped it at that because we've got a 30,000 capacity, 2,000 of which goes to the away fans, and then obviously we need to leave enough for match day sales. So the whole football club, to say it's gone off like a rocket is probably an understatement, and our challenge is to keep that upward trajectory, keep it going.
I was going to save the retail records for the big finish, because it's fascinating. So is it possible to quantify the Ed Sheeran effect? Have you ever sat down on the back of a beer mat and thought this is what we'd have earned without him?
We've tried to measure it on several occasions, and we're going down rabbit holes because it's very difficult to get to that calculation. But look, when you've got a local man who also happens to be the world's biggest superstar, on stage at Wembley on his opening night and rocks up in Ipswich Town's new kit that you've launched 24 hours earlier. It
Yeah.
does help.
Yeah.
And he asks for so little in return. It's incredible. He is a local man who supports his local community and his local football club. We're so proud of what he does. And, again, he's just a great figurehead for us. And listen, from a finance perspective, of course it impacts. When he tweets the new kit, he has a marketing reach that Chelsea and Manchester United can't get.
Wow, yeah, of course.
So it's very, very important to us, and long may it continue.
I know we have issues with time, Mark, so I don't want to take up too much of your morning. You mentioned briefly that the infrastructure expenditure is handy for FFP purposes, which is a different challenge in this league. I sometimes feel sorry for clubs and club owners, not very often, but sometimes, because fans these days are cynical in a way that anything that a club spends on improving facilities, so many fans immediately say, they're only doing it for FFP purposes, which is not the case. But it does seem fans think that way a lot of the time, don't it?
It does, and I can understand why some would think that. I think, look, we acquired a football club. I came in here just over 18 months ago to a football club that I underestimated the size of. Didn't really understand the depth and size of the fan base, the history of the club. It's very, very unique. It's a one club, one county football club. You go down the road one way, the first club you really hit is West Ham. And if you go the other way, there's the club that shall not be named. So the fan base is huge. And we bought a club that had been underinvested in for over a decade, maybe even 2 decades. So infrastructure, investment in community, marketing, data, academy, recruitment, personnel, you name it, had just been let go. So we came in with a plan that we weren't just going to spend the money from our backers on players. We were going to spend it across the board, and we were going to invest in infrastructure. We were going to invest rebuilding our community foundation. We were going to invest in the work that we do in the community. We were going to invest in facilities. Now, some of that, what you've just said, is absolutely right. If we're putting in new bars, we're putting in new fan zones, we're putting in facilities that allow us to do concerts, we can drive revenue from that. And from a financial fair play position, that helps. However, we've spent more on training ground pitches, performance, analysis, recruitment to drive performance on the pitch. And getting that balance between investing in things that you get a return on financially and investing in things that are just simply the right thing to do is key. And I think where our fans have been fantastic is understanding that. We spent a lot of time communicating to the supporters, communicating to the key stakeholders in the area what we're doing and why we are doing it. And if I've learned anything in 30, 40 years in this industry, is the quality of our communication is key. And taking our supporters and our stakeholders on the journey with us is a vitally important part of what we're doing.
I've got 2 questions for you, Mark, just to go. One about the past and one about the future. You mentioned having to change things financially, but when I was growing up, Ipswich were a great side. As you say, Sir Alf Ramsey, Bobby Robson, England managers came out of there. They were successful in Europe. They won the league, but they were owned all that time by a rather patrician, wealthy family, gentlemanly family. So I suppose when you had 50 years of an ownership model like that, it was always going to take probably 2 decades to change that round to become an efficient, financially modern football club, wasn't it?
Yeah, and there's no point having money to spend in football clubs. And we've seen this in the industry. You will have seen this time and time again. It's not about the amount of money you have. It's how wisely you spend it. And you have to move at pace in this industry, because if you don't, your competitors will go past you at lightning speed. I say to my staff all the time, what got us here will not get us there. What got us promoted from League One last season will not get us promoted from the Championship. We've got to be better. We've got to be more effective. We've got to be tighter. We've got to be more disciplined. We've got to be sharper, because we are probably this season in arguably the most difficult division in the world, because it's questionable. Is it more difficult staying in the Premier League or getting into the Premier League? There's not that much between it, I don't think. It's really, really difficult. So we have to move forward at pace. And the problem with football clubs, people don't like change. People are set in their ways. It's an industry which I've heard so many times, oh, well, we've always done it this way. That won't work. It's an industry where people will say seeing is believing. I'm slightly odd. For me, believing is seeing. And that goes back to the point that you said earlier. Was there a point that we thought we would slip into the playoffs? We couldn't allow ourselves to think like that. We genuinely had to have belief. And I think that was a key factor in getting us up.
Well, let's go right back to that early point then with my question about the future. You mentioned self-fulfilling prophecy. And I love that expression, what got us here will not get us here. But what do you do now? Do you look to consolidate, or do you look to push on for promotion, or is it presumptuous to make plans like that in such a difficult league?
Progression. Progression is the key word. Now, what progression will look like, who knows? But if each year you progress, if each year you score more goals, if each year you concede less, if each year you get more points on the table, you will ultimately get where you want to get to. Can't tell you when that's going to be. You've been around football long enough to know they're but the width of a post or a refereeing decision, and your season can go one way or another. But it's progression. We have to be more effective in our academy. We have to be more effective in our development squad, our analysis, our recruitment, our performance, our manager, our CEO, our ownership group. We all have to sit down, and what we create is a learning environment. I've been doing this a long time. The minute I think I know it all, I'm in a world of trouble. World of trouble. And that's why I need people around me that we run a model where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Our manager is really, really important to us. But don't underestimate how important Andy Rolls and the performance staff is. Gary Probant, recruitment, Luke Ware and player contractual, medical, sports science, data, let alone on the business side. Everybody has a role to play, because football clubs, things can change. Managers can change. We don't throw the baby out with the bathwater when that happens. I think our biggest opportunity is stability. Look at how many clubs, Championship, Premier League, changed their manager last year.
Yeah.
Never seen anything like it. Some change twice in a month.
Yeah.
Stability, calmness. We will have a bad run at some point. Law of averages will say that'll happen. We won't change. We'll stick to the plan. We'll adapt the plan, but we'll stay on the tracks. And I genuinely believe that stability, that planning, that ownership that gives you calmness to get on with your job will be a key differentiator for us.
Well, stability is great, but it's not always sexy, is it, for fans? That's the trouble. And but in the long term, it makes perfect sense to me, because at Palace, Steve Parish has got a very good record of sensing when to get rid of a manager, and he does it frequently. But that makes it more difficult to attract top managers, I think, in the future. If they know that the owner of the club is likely to get rid of them after they lose 3 games in a row, why would they go to that club? So stability is good, but sometimes keeping your head while the fans around you are losing theirs is a hard job, isn't it?
It's probably the most difficult job. And as a CEO, it's tough, but you have to ignore the noise. You've got to stay on the tracks. And that's why it's really important having a tight, good quality, robust team around you. Because at times it's tough, because, fans will question, stakeholders will question, media will question. But what no one never really understands is what really is going on inside the football club at that point. And if you can keep your head at that point and stay calm, that's when I think you can have a differentiator. I'm not one that hires and fires them, never have been. I think stability will be key. Keeping your head when you have the noise around you, and as a CEO, having the ability to ignore that noise and have good people around you, again, is key. But you're in, I think, as I said, the most difficult division in the world.
Yeah. Mark, as a Palace fan, I would love to see you in the Premier League, as long as we're still in it, because for me, Ipswich is one of the great away days, basically. And I still think it's a tragedy they knocked down the Drummond Monkey, which is the best away pub. In the best away, they should have had a protection order like a cathedral. That was a brilliant pub, that one. But I really would love to see Ipswich back in the Premier League. Any of us with an interest in football history, they are a club that deserve to be at the top table. So I wish you the very best of luck next season. And like many of us, will be keeping an eye on your results and also watching you on telly, because you're a really attractive team last season.
Thank you. And look, you're all welcome here at Portman Road any time. Maybe we get Palace in the cup and you come and see us. It'd be great to spend some time with you.
I'll tell you what, if Palace aren't playing, we'll come and see you anyway, because I really like Portman Road. It's been lovely to talk to you, Mark. Thank you for giving us so much of your time. We look forward to seeing how you get on in the Championship.
Thanks so much.
Kieran, some of the insight from Mark was absolutely fascinating. He was very honest, he's very open, but I really did learn a lot about having to run a football club, especially about the step up into the Championship. Mark's a man who knows the Championship very well. But there are three things that struck me in particular. It's one of those interviews where actually you and I could go through basically his answer to every question and discuss that for 5 minutes. But he talked about knowing full well that the Championship is the basket case financially that we all know. He knew the figures, but he said he was absolutely determined to hold his nerve, to keep his resolve and not get tempted into spending money the club hasn't got. But at the same time, he said the club has to keep moving forward. It has to progress. It strikes me that they're actually two difficult things to reconcile, aren't they?
They are, but I think what we have seen over the course of the last 12 months is that can be achieved. And the promotion of Luton Town, who I think have become the poster boys for every club that has recently come up from League One, is a really positive step. I was on the Monday Night Club with Mark Chapman and Gary Sweet, who is the chief executive of Luton Town the other night, and it was quite clear. He said, we weren't prepared to fall to every demand that came our way. We had a structure, we had a wage system, and we kept to it, and we concentrated on buying the right players and having the right atmosphere in the dressing room, and that can make up for it's not a deficiency, but have the issue of being not able to afford some players who are perhaps more technically adept and gifted. And it's worked, and they've been promoted. So I think, as far as Mark Ashton is concerned, good luck to him. If Luton can do it, if Luton hadn't been promoted, we would have seen Coventry City promoted, and they've taken a broadly similar approach as well. So I think there are sort of, I wouldn't say green shoots of hope appearing to that financial sanity can make a difference. But it does show that alternatives can be successful. And I think that will encourage some other clubs to say, why are we agreeing to lose 15 or 20 million pounds a year? We're not. All it's caught. The fans still aren't happy because if every club loses 20 million pounds in the Championship, only 3 are still going to get promoted. So you're still going to have 21 disappointed teams. I think he's right to take that approach, and he's also got a responsibility to protect the interests of the owners.
Well, I'll come on to the owners with my last point, Kieran, but there's two quick things. I thought it was fascinating because the last 2 seasons, their transfer dealings have been net zero, essentially, which takes a lot of doing. If they can do that in the Championship, that would be a great step forward. But basically, he said, we identify a certain type of player, young, hungry players that we will sell for a profit, which strikes me as a policy that most clubs could try. It also fascinated me that they had worked out, I asked the question semi-jokingly, but they had worked out how much retail sales would be without Ed Sheeran compared to with. But I thought he was particularly fascinating about the owners, where he said he admitted quite freely that, yes, they are financially better off than quite a few clubs already in the Championship, but that two things about the owners that they're an investment group, so in the end they will want to make a profit. But he said quite openly that the owners were very good owners because they left him and other people to do the football stuff. They were sensible enough to know that the best way to eventually make a return on their investment was to recruit football people to do the football jobs, which I thought was very interesting. And again, you think, well, surely there are a lot of other club owners who should be doing the same thing.
Yeah, I think there are some other club owners in that division. John Beresford at Millwall, he let Steve Cavan and the team get on with it. And I think that should be encouraged because actually it's in the owners' vested interests for that to take place as well. Because if you leave the football people to concentrate, set them a budget, set them limits, and they say, we're not going to get involved any further, if they get that club into the Premier League, that's where you get your return on your investment. You're not going to achieve that return whilst the club's in the Championship. So, encourage a positive culture, get the club to the Premier League, and then we've seen clubs be sold. And you're looking at the difference between your purchase price and your sale price, and hopefully the losses in between. If you've got a good team, they will be at a tolerable level and you make an overall profit.
Well, thank you to Mark Ashton for taking the time to talk to us. Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution as well, that would be very kind of you. You can do so by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. And if you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Bye.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.